Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 15th of August, 2024, and this is going to be a short discussion on Britain preparing for war. Before we kick this off, though, I want to just firstly confirm that all of the information mentioned in this session is all from verified sources, and it all can be found on the public domain. So if you're unsure or you want to clarify or verify yourself, then just get out there and have a look at it. I'm going to go back just 4 months or 16 weeks and want to remind people what we're actually talking about here. The UK government are doing a really good job at the moment of drip feeding the population, and quite rightly so. This method of information delivery is paramount to ensuring that the masses, that being the general public, are not sent into panic. This is a double-edged sword for the government. They have to be seen to be sort of providing you or us with some information, but that information is normally vague, and I'm going to cover some of them here, sort of in this session for you. When I say vague, I mean that they're they're sort of telling you that we or the UK are edging closer to a war footing or a pre-war stage. However, they're not really giving you any details as to why, and that's because they can't without really causing any level of sort of panic. Now we know why. Well, I say we. Most people, some people should know why we are having this discussion now and why we talk about war and conflict in Europe. And that's because of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine a couple of years ago. I'm not going to go into that. We should all know that. I'm going to throw up just a couple of slides as I normally do. Just I'll say this at I think I'll say this at the beginning of all, just to prevent people from falling asleep. But I think my voice is, does a really good job of doing that. But let me just try and keep you interested. Just to remind people quickly that Ukraine was invaded for the second time in just 10 years by Russia. We, or NATO, didn't really come to Ukraine's aid back in 2014, but we've done so this time round. So the 2022 invasion is still going on for anyone who's been living under a rock or something. And it constantly, you know, there's constant sort of threats being made by Vladimir Putin and his regime about attacking the rest of Europe and also attacking them with the use of nuclear weapons. Before we go off track again, or I go off track again, let's just go back 4 months to April. Yeah, it would have been April 2024, so only 3 or 4 months back. Rishi Sunak, when he was in power, took the political stage and he said this: "We will put the UK's own defence industry on a war footing. One of the central lessons of war in the Ukraine is that we need deeper stockpiles of munitions and for the industry to be able to replenish them more quickly." What does that mean when a country is on a war footing? Personally, I'd Google it yourself and it will tell you exactly what that actually means. But long story short, it means to be ready or preparing to fight a war in a state of readiness for war. Okay, so it can't be any more simpler than that. Actually, that's the only two words you really need to take from Richie Sunak's statement. That is war and footing, because the rest of it's just waffle. And I welcome this announcement all day long because we've heard numerous statements this year suggesting that the UK isn't ready for any kind of war. But what does it actually mean? The British infantry, Navy, and the Air Force personnel are always combat ready for war. And the British Armed Forces are amongst the most elite fighting forces on the face of this planet. However, the numbers in terms of military personnel are too low. And over the years, I'm sure, there's been a lack of investment in terms of equipment needed to allow those armed forces to continue being at the top of their game. I'm going to be having a discussion straight after this video, actually, where I want to be sort of talking about NATO's readiness for battle. And there I'll explain what the UK government mean when they're sort of stating we're not ready, and also what NATO have been doing up until now. So over the last sort of 2.5 years since the invasion of Ukraine, because when they say we, then I don't think they're not just meaning the UK, okay? They're meaning NATO. But suggesting, the UK isn't sort of ready for any kind of war will also mean logistically. The armed forces might not be prepared for prolonged sort of battles across war theatres due to the lack of equipment, such as ammunition, firstly, but also the components of the war machine itself. That being combat vehicles, whether that's going to be sea, on land, or even in the air. This would mean the size of the British naval fleet and the Royal Air Force. So there's enough, fully equipped units to be dropped, or is there enough? There probably isn't, but they're going to be asking themselves this question: are there enough fully equipped units to be dropped into any sort of battle arena at the moment, and then to be fully supported thereafter? Are our British forces spawning new sections across the armed forces that specifically specialize in things like drone warfare? So are our combat soldiers being taught drone warfare? It's a new form of warfare in this hybrid conflict, and we need to be sort of able and proficient to, sort of carry out those duties as well, because that's the new arm of the hybrid sort of conflicts that's happening at the moment in Ukraine. That is drones in the air, and also the new boat drones that are used out there as vessels on the sea. So when we're talking about drone warfare, it's not just about the drones that we're all familiar with up in the air. This also means the surface vessel drones. These sources have also revealed that there's been a 2-day war game, sort of, that took place back in April again. So that was April, only a couple of months ago or so, in the UK, and that involved officials from the Ministry of Defence, the Cabinet Office, the Home Office, and other departments to talk through how this country would respond to an armed attack. A paper circulating in government examines also what can be sort of learnt from the old but comprehensive system of plans called the Government War Book. And I don't know if any of you have heard of it. I'd kind of heard of it, but I didn't really understand what that document contained. But the Government War Book, that now sits in the National Archives here in the UK, which once detailed how the UK would sort of transition from peace to war. I'll explain what the sort of UK's war book is in a minute, but not in too much detail. That's not what this session's about. Sources also say lessons could be learned on how the UK mobilises its industrial base ahead of the Second World War, when it created a network of what they called back then shadow factories, which vastly expanded sort of production capacity of aircraft. For that war would have been the Spitfires. I may have said this in a couple of videos, or my previous videos. In fact, not may. I know I definitely have. I'm still not working. So, I've always considered the IT industry a safe place to be in terms of sort of contracting. So I've always contracted for the last 20 years in IT. I've always said that, everybody and everything requires IT, and it's an industry that's fairly safe. Even, I've gone through double dip recessions and still been working. I've also been looking at this situation incorrectly, though, in that I've been saying that the IT industry has been hit with whatever's causing its decline. But the more I look into this, it's not the IT industry that's the problem. It's the clients, the companies, the corporations, the organizations, and all businesses as a whole, who all request for such sort of positions to be filled. As we look at the bigger picture, I know from experience that the IT contracting and permanent worlds attract companies from all industries across all sectors. If it was only companies, let's say from the retail sector, then we could assume that the retail as an industry are being hit. But no, this is all companies. I spoke to somebody a couple of days ago. He was a recruiter, or he worked for a recruiting company, and he said to me that he'd been working in recruitment for 30 years now, and he's never seen the markets this bad. And why am I talking about this? You're probably thinking. Because a couple of months ago, I said to somebody that company owners, CEOs, directors, and investors will have an eye on the economy from a very high level. For instance, globally, that management and ownership level of players will definitely be keeping an eye on the developments unfolding around the world because those events could affect businesses or business for them. And therefore, business decisions have to be made accordingly for those events. When I'm being told by numerous people in business, and this is across different industries, that there are recruitment freezes and uncertainty in the economy, then what does that mean? It means that those people in the business world that hold sort of positions in higher places are watching conflict unfold, making them unsure as to how business is going to operate going forward. Let's, they're probably sort of, discussing and saying, let's not sort of employ any new staff just yet, especially if we can't guarantee them a job for too long. Hold back financially on proposed projects and any other investments, such as, I don't know, taking on new contractors to take ownership and complete such projects that I've been involved with. And I'm sure the list goes on from there, actually, in terms of the precautionary business decisions being made across all sectors. Now, when I say all sectors, I specialize in IT, but I've worked in finance and in retail and in, all sorts of industries or companies that operate in different industries. Guys, obviously, this is all speculation, but I'm trying to just look for the signs to try and understand what's going on here because I've never ever seen it this bad during my whole career. A process I go through when tracking the daily events and sort of filtering out all the shit online at the moment. This is a process and a mindset that really all of you should be adopting. When it comes to preparing, there are many factors to consider. But the one question, on everybody's mind has to be, is it likely to happen? Or is anything likely to happen either anywhere in the world that's going to impact me here? Or is anything actually going to happen to us here in the UK? That's likely to sort of turn people's worlds upside down. Now, the answer to those questions cannot be definitively answered. However, what we can do is go through this process, collect the information, analyze it, filter it, and then just decide on whether or not it's likely to be real or not. When going through this process, try and stick to logic and facts. I've gone off track again, as I do on pretty much all my bloody videos. So let's just steer the ship back on course and let's get on with it. I'm not going to sort of go into too much detail with this point, but the UK government, as in their cabinet office, holds the government war book in its archives, which I mentioned just now. A book that the sort of various UK committees assembled in sort of three parts, reflecting pre-precautionary stage matters, the precautionary stage, and then the war stage. So, long story short, the war book specifies actions to be taken by ministers and officials in each of these periods. These might be immediate and vital security measures, which require decisions at the earliest possible moment when there is a threat of war. We also have to consider your local councils in your area. So, people might be sort of sat there thinking, yeah, no one's doing anything because nothing's actually happening. Well, let me give you a wake-up call, okay? The government are well aware of what's going on. And that, remember, your councils, your local council here in the UK, I'm talking about, your local or district councils are working, well, they're managed by central government, okay? So they will be they will be having discussions. They will be talking about protocols and procedures. Okay, that's not to say everybody who works in a council is going to be familiar now with the war book or anything like that. What I'm trying to say is that the wheels are going to be in motion, and many people are not even going to know that those wheels are in motion. But like I say, we have to consider your local councils in your area. They too will have what they call councillors' guides to civil emergencies, informing those councils to sort of understand their capability and capacity in this area. So emergency and business continuity plans should be regularly visited. or revisited, should we say, to just check they reflect current capability. So that's going to be kind of test runs and certain scenarios and things like that. And that, just to ensure that key contact details are sort of kept up to date and that kind of thing. So if those action plans are triggered, you need to make sure that they're one, up to date, and two, they're still feasible. It's also noted that during wartime, councils and governments can call upon local businesses to help support the war effort. Obviously, depending on the industry that the company operates in. But let's say, for example, if you run a logistics firm and you have a fleet of 40 lorries, you could be asked to help transport supplies around your area and around the country, supporting the war effort. I don't work in management, but it would be interesting to know if there are sort of any business related war protocols within businesses that would be, I don't know, triggered upon request from the local council and or the government. So what I'm trying to say, let's say, for instance, you've got a fleet of 100 40-foot trailer articulated trucks, and you provide logistics or transportation around the country. Is there a policy in place now? I know the government have a policy where they can approach any business in this country and ask them, suggest, or even demand that they provide support for the war effort. Now, whether companies know that the government are in a position to do that, I would guess so. Anyway, going off track a little bit, what I'm trying to say is that there are processes and procedures, protocols and systems in place. And I'm just wondering if these things are, sort of in motion at the moment. Let's move on. So first thing, no, I'm not sending sort of, I'm not sort of, let me go back to this guy actually, firstly. Before Richie Sunak mentioned the war footing, he hits the political stage, and he sort of makes this statement. This is Richie Sunak, okay? Not on the screen. I'm going to come to this idiot in a minute. But he says, so, first thing, no, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army. But what I am proposing is a bold new model of national service for over 18-year-olds. They will be able to choose to spend 12 months at a full-time military commission or 1 weekend per month volunteering in roles within their local community. Now, the national service announcement back in 1948 was introduced by the Labour government. That's here in the UK. On the 1st of January 1949, healthy males between the ages of 17 and 21, I believe, were all required to serve in the armed forces for 18 months and remain on a reserve list for 4 years. Now, the difference between this announcement and Sunak's announcement is that Rishi had made the announcement before the war and not afterwards. So that's the UK government learning, one would expect, from the mistakes following the last World War. They're laying the foundations and they're setting the stage for a war theatre. Now, again, like the previous Rishi statement, the only two words that you need to be taken out of this is national service. And again, the rest of it's just more waffle. However, things have changed since this announcement in that we no longer have Sunak in power and we have a completely different government in play now. So it'd be interesting to know what Labour's view is on the national service. But let's not, let's just not get into the world of that bullshit or the bullshit politics. However, let's listen to what else is being sort of said about national service. Yes, this is not mandatory, but there will be sanctions for those of you that don't comply, but that won't be prison. Now, this guy, I just what's his name? James Cleverly. Right. I just want to read out to you what this guy says about national service, okay, and the reasons why. If you don't know who James Cleverly is, he's a UK MP who was Home Secretary back in April. I don't know where he is now or what he does now. I'm sure he is still in government, but I don't know what his position is. But his reasons as to why national service was being announced. So these are his following words. Well, what we have seen recently is a fracturing with more and more young people, particularly sort of living their lives in bubbles, isolating from their peers, mixing only with people from similar circles to their own. And what we want to do is find a way of bringing those people back together and finding a way to binding us together as a nation. And oh, actually, listen, that's enough bollocks. I'm not going to insult your intelligence with his shit. So the only reason why they're announcing national service is because the youngsters of today are living in bubbles, really. And on top of that, there will be sort of sanctions for those of you or for those of them that don't comply. Those of you that choose to stay inside those bubbles are going to be punished. Oh, my days. Anyway, and this is why, you just have to decrypt what these people in government are saying. They're sending a message, but how they send it is I don't know, it's all I don't know. Anyway, you just need to make sure that you can decrypt these messages, get rid of all the waffle, and then just act accordingly. Again, like I said to you, the two words that you need to listen to is national service, okay? Reasons why, how, if, buts, and who. Forget about all that, okay? They've mentioned those words. What they're doing, like I said to you, they are drip feeding the nation. And only last month, I think it was on the 23rd of July, 2024, the new head of the British Army, or the British Army actually stated that Britain must be ready to fight a war in 3 years, or Britain must just, no, Britain just has 3 years to be ready for war. But then he sort of goes on to say war is not inevitable, and the army had just enough time to prepare itself to avoid conflict. Let me just say that again. War is not inevitable, and the army had just enough time to prepare itself to avoid conflict. So actually, what does he say? What is that? What does that last statement mean? The war is not inevitable is merely a cloud, really, to sort of prevent the public from panicking, firstly, and but to sort of state that they have enough time to prepare itself to avoid conflict. Well, how on God's earth do you prepare an army to avoid conflict? The only way that that can be done is through sort of deterrence, and with that, keeps the UK involved in war. So it's just not feasible, because the war will end up being between Russia and NATO, and the UK is a NATO member state. He then goes on to say that among the key threats facing the UK in the coming years, highlighted by I think the general in a briefing is an angered Russia, which could seek retribution against the West for supporting Ukraine, regardless of who wins the war. He says it doesn't matter how it ends. I think Russia will emerge from it probably a weaker objectively, or a weaker nation objectively, or absolutely, but still very, very dangerous and wanting some form of retribution. So I keep saying that word wrong. I'm going to start again. He said it doesn't matter how it ends. I think Russia will emerge from it probably weaker objectively or absolutely, but still very, very dangerous and wanting some form of retribution for what we have done to help Ukraine. Okay, so this is your head of the British Army stating or making these statements. He also warned that China was intent on retaking Taiwan, and Iran was likely to pursue nuclear weapons. Now, just before I finish, I'm done now pretty much. I watched a video last week which was published just recently over the last couple of weeks, and it highlighted in quite some detail what NATO have been doing to prepare for this war against Russia. So, with all of the above in mind, what we have done here is sort of listen to articles and political announcements made or made to the general public by the governments of the UK. Politicians are trained to give you a message enveloped in mystical sort of bullshit, shall we say. So as I've said before, just decrypt the messages. Look at the keywords being used, that being national service, war footing, preparing for war, and the key statement being made is within 3 years. These are messages, guys, that your government, if you're living in the UK, are telling you. If you walk away, from this session still sort of thinking that this is all a load of bullshit, then that's fine. Honestly, I would just say stay away from the channel and other channels that are similar to this, or channels that are giving you similar information. Because none of the, if that's how you're feeling still, this is just not going to be of any use to you, and I'm just wasting your time. So, with the conflicts that are unfolding and unfolding simultaneously around the world, the battleground seems to be sort of preparing itself for a world war between two sides. Those two sides is the East and the West. So, with that in mind, there are four main players at the moment in terms of, I suppose, potential enemies. This is potential enemies to the West. That's going to be Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Now, guys, that's enough for me. I've bored you enough. All I want to say really is just get yourselves military fit, infantry aware, and I'm off.